In a previous video, I showed you exactly how I earned 300,000 Avios. In this video, I'll show you exactly what you can do with that and some amazing sweet spots in the Avios program that you may not be aware of. So destinations that are bookable using Avios are bunched into zones. So this is the zone map. So in this example, we're flying out from London, and as you can see, the further out you get, the higher the zones are, and therefore the higher the Avios required to fly to them. Now this map is actually out of date, but I couldn't find any more up-to-date maps showing the general zones and locations and how they fall across the world. Avios can be used to book many airlines. For now, we'll look at British Airways in most of our examples. One of the tools that I use to see where airlines fly to is Flight Connections. I'll leave a link below, but essentially this is where you can see all the destinations that oneworld alliances fly to. You can also further filter this down to the specific airlines, so whether it be British Airways or Qatar Airways, etc. Now, two other great resources which I fully recommend is Seat Spy, which lets you quickly search for British Airways seats, and Head for Points. It's a great resource for anything points related, and do subscribe to their newsletter. It contains a lot of useful information, and it's where I usually get a lot of my information from. So there's two things that you need to be aware of when booking Avios tickets. So with British Airways and Iberia, they operate on a peak and off-peak calendar. So this is essentially where peak dates naturally are more expensive compared to off-peak, and often they will mirror the school holidays of those countries. Now the other thing to be aware of is taxes. So there's always a tax element when booking Avios. For simplicity's sake, the tax due in Europe reward flights is capped at £35. However, one thing you'll notice is when you do select a flight and you scroll all the way down, the default option will be to show you the lowest tax amount and the highest Avios amount. Now that isn't always the best value for money. What you need to do is click more options, and then it will show you other pricing options. The one that you want to go for is the one that says £35 in terms of tax. Usually that's the best value for money. If you are Avios rich, then by all means you can go for the lower tax amount. However, it's not really a good use of Avios in my book. When you venture further out, the prices of tax can vary, but for example, Dubai is £100 return in economy. Taxes in business class can be a bit ridiculous, especially on British Airways. Now, I'll talk more about taxes and how to reduce taxes at the end of the video, so stick around for that. Now let's take a look at some routes. So within Europe, you can fly to as far as Turkey and as south as the Canary Islands. Now prices to more nearby cities start at 9,500 Avios plus £35, and those far away places in Europe like Turkey and the Canaries start at 18,500 Avios plus £35. This can represent a considerable saving when flying during peak times like school holidays and so on. However, other times you have to weigh up the benefits. Say for example, if you want to fly to the Canary Islands in November is one of the cheapest time to fly to the Canary Islands. You can often find flights with Ryanair for about 20 quid. Now that's much cheaper than just the cash element or the tax element of a Avios ticket. So in those cases you may as well book with cash and fly with the likes of Ryanair. Other times obviously you have to weigh up how much a cash ticket is. But often the best use of Avios is during peak times. So let's look a little further out. Now Dubai and generally the Middle East falls into Zone 5, which costs 50,000 Avios and £100 in tax, and that's for a return ticket. That is for an off-peak date. Now I actually booked this particular route, so Dubai in particular, and it cost me 50,000 Avios due to it being off-peak, even though I'm actually technically going in the school holidays. Now the reason for that is because I'm actually flying out a day before the peak dates start, because it's an evening flight and it's overnight, so it made sense for me to just simply go a day before. Now the equivalent cash cost of a ticket during the school holidays was coming up to about £1,000, so this is a worthwhile redemption. At least for me it is. It's £1,000 versus 50,000 Avios plus £100. Now I will do another video about how I booked these tickets, because this is essentially a very high demand route, especially during the school holidays. So you do have to book 355 days in advance, and there are some ins and outs that you need to be aware of when booking 355 days in advance. So keep an eye out for that video. I will upload something around that. So one sweet spot around this region is Sharm el-Sheikh. Now this does fall into zone 4, however it's actually priced as if it's in Europe, and the cost is 18,500 plus £35 during off-peak and 21,500 Avios and £35 during peak times. In fact, destinations that are closer, like places like Cairo, are actually more expensive, weirdly enough. So yeah, Sharm el-Sheikh is a very good Avios redemption. So this zone chart is out of date in terms of pricing for some of these zones. So we'll just ignore the pricing for now, but it does have some useful information here. Now, if you look at these zones, there's certain cities that are coloured in red or green dots. One way of maximizing Avios is to stretch the value of some of these zones. Now, for example, on this map, you've got Colombo and Mali right on the edge of one of the zones. Therefore, you are maximizing the distance that you can travel for that zone. Whereas if you look at another example such as Kuala Lumpur, that's at the beginning of zone 8, therefore you're charged a significantly higher amount of Avios versus if it was to be on the edge of zone 7. Now this can help maximize the value you get from Avios. However, if it's not a destination that you want to go to, then it's one of those things where it's really a moot point. You may be thinking, it's all well and good having so much Avios, but I can never book anything to where I want to go, when I want to go. So this is where the 355-day rule will help you. I will do a separate video on that, so do subscribe for that. But I'm not going to leave you hanging just yet. Now, one unique thing that British Airways have done is operate Avios-only flights. Now, this is where essentially all the seats on that particular flight are available to redeem using Avios. Now, this has been often during peak time, so during school holidays, and it's been to very popular routes such as Sharm el-Sheikh and Dubai, which are the two routes that I've mentioned already. They have also done this for a number of European routes. Now, I suspect that they will be doing this more and more often in the future, so do subscribe to their newsletter so that when they do launch it, they usually email out to their British Airways Executive Club subscribers. That way you'll be the first to bag these Avios seats as soon as they're released. Now let's talk about tax. Now with economy, as you've seen, the flights, at least within Europe and to some destination like Sharm, they're capped at £35 per person. However, that isn't always the case with business class flights, and especially on other airlines. Now let's take a look at London to Doha, for example. Now with British Airways, that particular route costs 160,000 Avios and £350. This may seem reasonable initially, but it comes at the cost of using significantly more Avios. Now let's take a look at another airline such as Qatar Airways, which also flies this route, London to Doha. Now they come in at a mere 86,000 Avios plus about the same tax. Better yet, let's change the origin to Dublin and the tax element drops significantly to about £153. Pair that with a Ryanair flight, a cheap Ryanair flight to Dublin, and you're onto a winner, saving significant cash for each person flying. Now, obviously, there are some caveats with that, where essentially, if it's not really a connecting flight, so you're not protected in that sense. But if you build in a comfortable gap between your Ryanair flight and the Qatar flight, you should be safe. Often, it can be easier to catch a Ryanair flight to Dublin than it is to get down to London. Remember, for Qatar Airways flights, you can also search directly on the Qatar Airways website. Now, the reason for doing that is they can show some availability that British Airways may not have access to. So always do check both when redeeming on Qatar Airways flights. So the other reason for checking on the Qatar Airways website is that they release their flights 360 days instead of 355 days like British Airways. Now, what can happen is people looking on the Qatar Airways website can book up the Qatar Airways flights much earlier than the British Airways site. This would mean that if you fail to check on the Qatar Airways website early enough, you may find that there are no longer any seats available. Now, one other tip I'll leave about taxes is that the taxes can be quite high, especially in premium classes, due to the air passenger duty due on flights leaving the UK. Now, one tip I'd recommend is booking a economy seat out, so basically paying the, say for example we were going to Doha, then your tax due on a one-way flight in economy class is going to be £50. Now what you can do instead is fly out in economy and return back in business class, what you'll find is the taxes due on a return flight will be much cheaper, especially on the Qatar Airways flights. I don't want to make this video too long as Avios can be a complex topic, but you can use Avios for other routes across the world. So one great use of Avios is in the USA. Now in this example, you can fly from New York to Los Angeles for a mere 16,000 Avios and £4.40 in tax. Now there's many routes like this all across the world. You'd have to go check out which routes work for you, and always try one-way options when searching if you can't find exactly what you're looking for, because sometimes you might actually need to be a bit flexible, which is one of the key things when using Avios. And first just try searching for one way and then look for the return separately. If you've got any questions about anything I've mentioned in this video or anything Avios related, then drop a comment below. I'll do my best to answer them as best as possible. And as always, do give it a like if this video has been useful, and subscribe for more videos like this in the future.